Good afternoon, everybody. So glad that you could all be here. This is a kind of a special service. We don't normally hold a service this time, but each year after we come back from Belize, we try to give some kind of report. We decided this would be a good time to do that. It's hard to believe that tomorrow, Jacob and Ted, will be a month since we started on this trip. And we're down there for 10 days. We've been back that long, but we had a great time. We're going to be sharing with you some of those experiences and adventures we had and fun times and some very serious times that we had while we were in Belize. I'll be saying more about the trip itself, of course, as we go on through, but we're going to worship as well as have a report. So I've asked one of our song leaders, Mark Rao, to come and lead us in a couple of songs now and then maybe some more later. So if you do that right now, brother, and while you're coming, I'll go ahead and mention that after the two songs, Dr. Ted Cove, who's been there many times, I'll tell you more about him in a little bit, but he's going to come and lead us in a prayer, and then after the prayer, he's welcome to share any thoughts he has about the trip, and then we'll move on to the rest of the presentation. So Mark, lead us in a couple of songs, please.
Before we get into this, I've been back there looking at all the food coming in, so we're going to sing all three songs real quick. We're not going to sing the choruses, we're only going to sing one verse. So that way we can get back there and eat.
Okay, whatever you want.
All right, okay. Number 571. And when you get to that spot, mark that, because we'll sing 572 at the end of the worship service. 571. Seeking the lost as kindly entreating, wanderers on the mountain of stray, come unto me, his message repeating, words of the Master speaking today, going afar upon the mountain, bringing the wanderer back again into the fold of my Redeemer, Jesus the Lamb for sinners slain. Seeking the lost and pointing to Jesus, souls that are weak and hearts that are sore, leading them forth in ways of salvation, showing them back to life evermore, going upon the mountain, bringing the wanderer back again into the fold of my Redeemer, Jesus the Lamb for sinners slain. Thus I would go on missions of mercy, following Christ from day unto day, cheering the faint and raising the fallen, pointing the lost to Jesus the way, going afar upon the mountain, bringing the wanderer back again into the fold of my Redeemer, Jesus the Lamb for sinners slain. 673, I think is what it is. No, that's not it. I had it marked, and then I took the marker out. Wasn't that good? It is 632. 632. Of one the Lord has made the race, through one has come the fall, where sin sin has gone must go His grace. The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone must go His grace. The gospel is for all. Say not the heathen are at home. Beyond we have no call. For why should we be blessed alone? The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone must go His grace. The gospel is for all. Received ye freely, freely give. From every land they call. Unless they hear, they cannot live. The gospel is for all. The blessed gospel is for all. The gospel is for all. Where sin has gone must go His grace. The gospel is for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, we praise your holy name and thank you for giving us life and health and the privilege to gather here tonight. Pray that you would bless this worship service, bless each person that's here, and bless every family that's represented. We thank you, Father, for looking down on us with mercy and blessing us with the gift of Jesus, the most wonderful blessing that the world's ever known. Pray, Father, that you would help us to love Him and live for Him. We thank you for that plan of salvation, the gospel plan of salvation, plainly and simply presented in Jesus' teachings and all throughout the Bible. Help us to read and study our Bibles and be prepared to present the truth to others. We thank you, Father, for the church throughout the world. Pray for every effort that's being made to carry the gospel to others. Especially thank you for this congregation that's been so interested in mission work, especially in the work in Belize. We thank you for the leadership here and all of the effort that the brethren have put into helping others in the way of missions. We pray, Father, that you would continue to care for and bless this congregation in the future. Father, we thank you for letting us live in America where we have so many freedoms and so many blessings from the material way that other people throughout the world don't know and never will know. And may we not be content with all the material things that we enjoy in this great land, but help us be willing to share the spiritual blessings, using our material means to share the spiritual blessings with others throughout the world. Father, we thank you for the individuals or the occasion or whatever the event might have been that presented the gospel to us. Most of us can say it was our loving parents, but for others who came to the gospel a different way, we each offer our thanks for the occasion through which the gospel was presented to us. Thank you, Father, for loving us and blessing us. We're all sinners, and we pray, Father, that you would Okay, I'll be glad to talk with you a little bit here about, we had a very good trip to Belize this year. I wish we could give you numbers of dozens of Bible studies that we had and baptisms and things like that, but we just don't have the big numbers to present to you. But I can tell you that I think a lot of seed was sown that's going to make a big difference in the lives of many people there. And you can be proud. I thought I'd go down there and hear the same sermon dozens of times, meeting after meeting, but I got to tell you, Keith went there to preach, and he did a great job. And frankly, I don't know that I heard the same sermon twice. So, but he did have a lot of good things to do in the way of encouragement. 4 little congregations in particular. And at one of those little congregations, there was a couple of friends that he had invited over the internet to be there. And I happened to sit down beside them, and I sat down beside one of the ladies, and the other one was in the pew immediately behind us. And they happened to be from Santa Cruz, a village down the road from San Antonio, the place where the congregation was, where Keith was preaching. And it was so glad to see them. They were a new face, and so I introduced myself to them. And come to find out, they were a couple of little Baptist girls from Santa Cruz who had come. And I told them how glad we were that they were there. And they were just bubbling over with enthusiasm. Oh, it was so encouraging to be here. We're glad we came. And so we gave them a ride home. I don't know how many miles down the road, 6 or 8 miles down the road, that they were going to get out and try to catch a bus or walk home. But at any rate, we're so wonderfully blessed to be in America. We really don't know what persecution is, and we can pray that we'll never know what real persecution is. There's places in this world that you can lose your life if you are caught with a Bible. And I'm talking about the Muslim countries of the Middle East that just extensive intolerance to Christianity, and we think of how people have lost their lives, and they have, and they continue to. But we're wonderfully blessed that we're protected from things like that. But there is persecution that exists to some degree. To us, it's usually just some snide remark or some verbal comment that somebody made. But this is a typical example that I see. In America, I think it's mainly malice directed toward religious people, not just necessarily members of the church, but you have the atheist and the humanist and the like that who want to persecute and deride and discourage anybody who is a religious person. But in Belize, I'm more inclined to think that we see things like the Catholic Church being responsible for a lot of the persecution against people who are Christians. And an example of that was in Cricketoogie, the first meeting we had, the first sermon that Keith presented. I sat down on one end of the pew, and I guess the pew was 10 or 12 feet long, and there was a lady sitting on the end of the pew. She was a very pretty lady, and she sang very well. She just a beautiful voice and sang. When the emblems for the communion came around, I turned to pass the bread down to her, and she just sat there, and the guy passing the emblems reached out and took the bread and went on his way. Well, the same was then when the wine when the collection plate came around, he handed the collection plate to me. Well, he gave me the opportunity to make my contribution. Then he carried it down to the end of the pew, and she made her contribution. So immediately after the service was over, I scooted on down that way, and I introduced myself, and I found out, tried to learn as much about her as I could. She was a 39-year-old lady who was a widow. She had a 14-year-old son who was in the congregation there, and with her that day. And I asked her, I said, well, you sure sing beautifully. And I noticed, though, that when the emblems for the communion were passed, that you didn't partake. And she said, well, no, I didn't. And I said, well, do you have you been baptized? Have you obeyed the gospel? Have you been baptized? And she said, I want to be baptized. And I thought, hot dog. Keith, here's your first. And I said, well, tell me a little bit. And I said, do you have family here? Because before we noticed, Gloria, that there were people who would come to the church and would be there we would see them years and years and years. And they never took the initiative to obey the gospel. But they would be there, their family, oh, my grandfather is so-and-so. And they would take comfort in who their family was, but they never took the personal initiative to be baptized. So I said, well, why have you not been baptized? And I said, do you have family here? And her brother was the preacher. Nicasio was her brother, and he was a preacher. And I said, well, so you know all about the scriptures. You've been exposed to the Bible teaching and lesson and study as much as Nicasio, the preacher. And she said, oh, yes. And I said, well, I tell you, I want to ask you, you figure a time where we would love to meet and study with you. You take, you just get you a piece of paper and you write down every question that you might have about baptism. And we would love to study with you and see if we can help you. And it ended up, this lady told us to be there 10 o'clock on Saturday morning at her house. She lived right across the road, less than a quarter mile up from the church building. And so we were back, and we were there, but she was gone. Her son said, well, at 5:30 this morning she got on the bus, came by and went to town, and wouldn't be back until after 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we came back at that time and ran into her son again, who said, well, she's not available, she's down on the creek. I said, well, what are the chances we could go down there on the creek and find her? No, you probably wouldn't be able to find her. And so we went on our way. Well, it happened that this lady is a school teacher. She teaches in a remote village of San Jose, and she goes and spends all 5 days in San Jose and then comes home on the weekends. Well, it happens to be that that's a Catholic school. And as we talked with her brother, the preacher, and ironed the story out, what it boils down to is if she is found to be a Christian by the Catholics that run that school, then she would probably lose her job. So her livelihood depends on her teaching job. And if she becomes a Christian, at some point, I don't know if on a yearly basis she has to reapply for the job or anything or what, but if they found out that she had been baptized or it was a member of some other religious organization other than the Catholic Church, then she would fear losing her job. So persecution can come in various ways, and we're wonderfully blessed that we have minimal persecution here in our country, but the time is coming, and more and more bad influences in our government will humanness to drive God out of our lives is exerted throughout our society. But it's always good good feeling to step back on the ground, and whether it's Atlanta or Houston or wherever, that you're back on American soil. So we want to thank everybody for their support, not just their support on this trip, but in the past, and how wonderfully so many of y'all helped care for little Eduardo Cobb and his father Marcus. We visited him, by the way, and that's another longer story, but we're hoping to be able to help his little sister who is deaf to be able to hear. Just briefly, I carried a little bone conduction audio device, and I had a recording on my cell phone, and she put that on, and I've never heard her do anything but just grunt in her communication. She's 7 or 8 years old.
9 years old.
She's 9 years old. And when she put the little bone conduction thing on and I turned that on, she just brightened up and she just hollered out because she could hear something that she had never heard before. So we're going to work to try and help little Raina be able to hear to some degree. She may never be able to develop good speech, but she may be able to hear much better because she doesn't hear anything now. We're looking forward to that. But we want to thank everybody for all the help that y'all have been. Thank you.
I should mention that this trip that he was just on was only his 24th to Belize. Can you believe that? That's because around 30 years ago, or something close to that, some members of the Mayfair Church of Christ, particularly a husband and wife, doctor, nurse team, decided they wanted to try to do some medical things in the name of Christ and for the cause of Christ. And after a year or two, ended up in Belize and worked there for many, many years, and formed at one point a rather large team of doctors, nurses, some dentists. They did that first out in one of the villages, San Antonio, he mentioned a moment ago, and eventually it all moved back into Punta Gorda. I'll tell you more about these places in just a moment. And so we have several people here that were a part of that. Gloria Harrington is a nurse. She went down there now over 20 times. Her husband Jim went several times. Marissa, a young member, her parents, her brother are here tonight. Jim Gillespie, where's Jim? He is a pharmacist, retired here from Huntsville Pharmacy, on that in town, and he went several times, and other pharmacists, and so it's quite an operation. And I believe they did something right at or just short of 1,100 successful surgeries, all kinds of surgeries. And they don't have surgeons, or they have an operating room, but they don't do surgeries at the little hospital in Toledo district. There's a whole district, I'd almost call it a state within the country. And if anybody has an emergency, a medical need, a surgery, it's kind of a clinic, but they have to get on the bus or somehow be transported up to cities 2 and 3 and 5 hours away. And so this was such a great service until their government decided to shut it down out of fear that they might someday have some liabilities and be responsible. The team never had anything but just marvelous success with all their surgeries. We didn't have anybody get sick or die from any of that, but that got shut down about 5 years ago. Then, quickly, my part of the story. Francie and I moved here 4.5 years ago. We moved, I had retired from a preaching job in Texas, and we wanted to still work with the church. We didn't know where we might go. And I have been interested in a while going back and getting more into some mission trips. I've been in mission trips before, and we found out through some mutual friends about an opening here at this very congregation, and began to preach here some, and then was offered a part-time job, which I've enjoyed ever since, and found out that they're very involved in this work in Belize. So not the first year, but the second year that I was here, went on a trip with them, with Gloria and several others, and about 10 in all on that team, and have been now, this was my 4th trip that I've gone. So it just all has worked together beautifully. I feel very blessed to be a part of that. But I want to introduce next, and have him come up in a moment, Jacob Jackson. He was the 3rd member of our team this year, and I met Jacob about 1.5 years ago. He was a resident at His Way, a ministry here in town. He may tell you more about that in a moment. And I don't know how, but I just kind of took a shine to him. Johnny over there works with us, and I think you may have recognized some of the same things that I did in him. And obviously, they did there. He went through a 6-month basic program with them, decided to go into their advanced recovery group, and was another 6 months. And then before he was finished with that, his way of ministry there, the organization hired him, and he's been an employee of theirs, a very vital employee to them ever since. And so somewhere along the way, and I'll let him tell you more about this, I asked him if he would like to go to Belize with us. And I'll get his reaction in a moment to that. But I could just tell every time, in the process of, I teach a Bible class there every Tuesday night, I'd mention something about Belize and going on those trips, and he would seem to especially sort of perk up and listen. So Jacob, why don't you come on up? And I'm going to let you stand here at the pulpit for a minute or two, okay? Just kidding. You can use that mic and I'll use another. First of all, I'm really glad that he went with us. He was a great blessing. When I asked him to go, I was thinking both he'll be good for the program and it'll be good for him, and I think that proved itself out in every possible way. So, first question. You'd heard me talk about the Belize trips, but when I first asked you to go, what was your thought or what was your reaction when I said, why don't you go to Belize with us?
I think, first off, I don't know, I've always been interested in travel. So the thought of that initially just, it sounds awesome to get to be a part of that. And then I've always wanted to go on a mission trip as well. I don't know, I really thought that something like that would be a possibility. I wasn't anticipating that. So It was very exciting to think about it when you asked me.
All right. He didn't tell you, but just this happens to a lot of people, but before this trip, he'd never flown on an airplane. He'd never been outside the country. And so he got his first flight from from here to Atlanta, and then on a big jet from Atlanta to Belize City, where the international airport is. And he so took to flying that the third flight, he flew the plane down there to, well, not exactly. You'll see some pictures in a minute. I kind of asked him, got him arranged so he could sit in the co-pilot seat. So he had a terrific view of the takeoffs and landings that we did. And probably only took about 75 pictures out the window, so we'll talk more about that. Well, kind of on the physical, the topography of it and all, what maybe surprised you? I tried to show you pictures and things before you went, but what maybe was a surprise about the country or the villages or something from a kind of physical standpoint? Landscape, whatever you want to say.
It's really interesting how different it looks than here. Like plants everywhere, different fruits and stuff just growing everywhere. Saw some exotic birds, like a couple toucans flew, some moths that were about this big, very scary.
Moths, yeah. I'll tell you about the moths later in the presentation.
The mountains, like how they're just random little mountains that are not part of a chain or anything like that. It's really cool. I don't know, it's interesting because it looks different. In the town, the roads are totally different. They're barely roads.
Well, probably more important than that, I know you were delighted with all that, but tell us about impressions, and I know when it got time to leave, you wanted to come home, but there was also a part of you probably made more of a connection with people, so tell us about
I did. I made a lot more of a connection with people there than I could have anticipated. I had a chance to talk to pretty much every member of all the churches that we went to, and places, you go to churches here and that doesn't always happen, and I thought that it was interesting there that it does happen there, and made me kind of wonder what the difference is too, and maybe the difference is with me as well, But yeah, I'm still talking to a couple of the people on a regular basis now that I met there.
What do you think was the big, I know there's a lot of impressions and a lot of memories, but what do you think was the biggest thing that you'll carry away from this trip as just a kind of a treasured memory in your heart? Some kind of special blessing or something that came to you?
Probably one of the most memorable things was the day at Marcus and Brandon's house, when she put the ear pieces on and she lit up. That was really cool to see that, to be a part of that, and I wish that we could have progress as far as, getting there eventually.
You expressed to me a number of times during the trip, we roomed together and we could get a chance to talk, how quickly you came to feel connected with the people. You want to say anything about that, or was that just a kind of marvelous thing? You've already said it, maybe.
Yeah, kind of already did. And I don't know really what the difference is. I guess we're kind of foreign to them, and they're foreign to us, so it makes us ask more questions, get to know each other more than we do here, even because it's, I don't know, we find interest in one another, and that's really...
Okay. One last question. While you were there, you started talking about wanting to come back, and so how did you come to that decision? And I'm glad you did, but tell us how you sort of, at what point you realized this is something I want to do again?
Well, like I said, when it first began, when you first asked me, and I just thought the experience would be cool. But after going there, being stretched a little bit, being asked by a couple of preachers to either pray during the service or do the communion, or have an opportunity to serve like that, just things like that along the way, feeling like we were doing some good and some things like that, it turned into way more of a spiritual blessing for me than I even anticipated. So
Okay.
that makes me want to continue.
Well, I'm delighted to have known you all this time, but especially that you got to do this, and I just hope to be able to do that again, maybe more times. And all right, thank you for being a part of this. Thanks for coming up here.
The chief cook and bottle washer, everyone.
Chief cook and bottle. We'll say more about that in a moment. All right, we're going to show some pictures, and we'll get through this as quickly as we can. Have less pictures, but I wanted to pick ones that I think would be representative of how some of the things we got to do down there. So we'll see how this goes. All right. First, and I know some of you are very familiar with this, but in case you don't know where Belize is, it's a part of Central America. It's not that far away. It's about 1,500 miles from Huntsville. And of course, Mexico, you see, is right up there to the north and the west of it. There's Belize. It's not a big country. It's probably about a third the size of Alabama. Has a total population right about the same number as live in Huntsville, Alabama. But a lot of the country is jungle oriented. You see these other countries. So Belize is bordered by Guatemala, Honduras. In fact, we spent our hotel in one of the churches where we was right there. You can see across the bay some of the mountains in Honduras. But the interesting thing which makes it so beautiful for our ministry is that of the 7 or 8 countries that are in there, it's the only one where English is spoken just about by everybody. So it's very easy for us to preach and teach and meet people and not have those language barriers that otherwise might have. And now a little more specifically, here's the region of Belize. There are 6, they call them districts, or I'd call them states almost in the country. And up here is the capital city of Belmopan. Belize City is, these two are the 2 major cities. This is where the international airport is that we flew into. We minister down here in the Toledo district, which is far away. Most of the resorts, you've heard about people going to vacations in the cruise ships stop up in this area. There's some fantastic islands, resorts, snorkeling, all kinds of, there's a reef out there. But down here, this is pretty much the poor district and sort of neglected, in my opinion, by the country. And there's Punta Gorda, where we had our hotel room, and then several of these villages were out from this. And that's where we spent all of our time. We did fly on, I mentioned him, joking about him flying on the plane. We did take a smaller, plane down from Belize City to Punta Gorda, and there he is sitting up in the co-pilot seat, and this was a selfie, but you can see he's sitting next there looking out, and he really enjoyed that, and it was a lot of fun watching him enjoy it. Okay, here's one picture of the dozens he took over much of this flight. It takes less than an hour to get from there with a stop in between, a 5-minute stop in another very small place. A lot of jungle, and it runs along the coastline, and there are literally hundreds of these little islands, most of them uninhabitable just off the coast. But then we eventually got on down to Punta Gorda, which is kind of the primary city in Toledo. This is the little plane that we flew on. That's the three of us that you've already seen and been introduced to this evening. That's our arrival. That's our hotel. I've stayed there 4 times. I jokingly but affectionately also refer to it as our home away from home. We've become good friends with the innkeeper. Anybody that's ever been down there more than once or even just once loves Hampton. And he started with 2 rooms about 20 years ago, and it's added on to 16 rooms now. It's not real modern, but it is very nice, very clean, very comfortable. Has a lot of amenities. It has air conditioning, and each room has its own bathroom, toilet, and so forth. And it's just a very comfortable place to get back to every night there in PG. PG stands for Punta Gorda. First afternoon we're there, Jacob took this from the back balcony, looking out towards some of those pop-up mountains that he referred to, and you may be able to see the airstrip there. Every time there's a plane takes off or lands, we hear it loud and clear in our hotel room, just right there. The hotel is about 150 yards from the little airport. And this was taken later in the week, but that's a sign. It's on the ocean there. There's a bay, and but it's really not built up and prepared to be a resort place. There's a very minor, just a few feet of sand and hardly any beach area, and they haven't really developed it like perhaps I wish they would for their sake as a tourist area. But this is a sign when you come from one of the directions from out in the country. I love Pieni, which is Cove is the original name of what's now Punta Gorda many centuries ago, and that's Jacob. He always liked to explore those places and get them to see them up close and personal. We got to meet people at restaurants and sometimes in their homes, sometimes at the church buildings and other places. Sometimes they would come and visit us at the hotel. And one of the first people we got to meet, this is Dr. Legra, who was there, a very key person to help all these doctors. And you see she and Dr. Ted are visiting, and so we met her, and she has helped the team in the past so much with a lot of the medical things, and has certainly been a friend to us in so many ways. We met her and had breakfast with her, and you'll notice just a couple of things. I like to point this out. We're used to having potatoes or something. They serve beans with every breakfast meal, and they're really delicious. And the most wonderful thing is a thing called Fry Jacks. Anybody's had Fry Jacks loves them. They're kind of like a sopapilla if you're familiar with a Mexican restaurant, and they serve an overabundance of those with every meal. But this was a place called Grace's Restaurant. We ate there about 3 times. It's a really good place to meet people or just get away for a quick meal. We got there on Saturday. We got settled in on Saturday night. Sunday morning we drove out to Crickahootie. Ted told you some of the story about one lady in the church we met out there. And we're actually following another one of the preachers who was coming to visit with them that morning. These roads are very unlike most roads we have here. There's one real nice highway, real nice, built by the Japanese since the team started going. Some of you can remember when the team used to go between a place called San Antonio and PG, that the roads were all the same, gravel and rutted and just terrible roads. But this road, we went up there 4 times between preaching and trying to go back and have a study with that lady, and it's just almost, you don't have the car to survive it. But this is us driving up there on that Sunday morning. Another view of one of those roads that we got onto. This is, now laugh at this if you want to, I know I'm unusually tall, but the people there are unusually short. And this preacher, this is Nicasio, this one he was talking about, and his sister, that we hope to have that study with. We did not get a picture of them meeting with us, but this is in their little church building. And we had a lot more time this time with Nicasio than we normally have, and we appreciated that. The church buildings are very simple, they're concrete or block buildings. They have open windows, no screens, and that's where Jacob got to meet his friends, the moths. He loved the moths when they flew in. Not right? That was wasn't afraid of anything, other critters in the jungle and so forth, but didn't like those moths. But in my preaching experience down there, I've had chickens run through while I'm preaching. I've got one of my favorite pictures is one time there was a dog got under the Lord's table. Don't know what he was doing there. And I've heard some of them from the previous trip say that pigs have run through. You know, the pigs kind of run wild during church service, but that hadn't happened to me. But anyway, lovely group of people, and we enjoyed being there. Oh, he took a picture with always an abundance of children, always lots of kids around in the churches and everywhere else. And so we try to figure out little ways to play with them and entertain them and whatever. And this is the thing where I have the little boys particularly hold their arms stiff, and I'll lift them up and make them feel like they're flying or something. So I guess Jacob took that picture. But we had a lot of fun with the kids as well as interaction. This is later in the week, but there's the preacher in Nicasio, and this is out on a place that it's on top of a little mountain. They cleared about 1.5 acres. He is him and his wife, and they have 6 children. And they literally live off the land. They grow vegetables, they have chickens, turkeys, they have raised a hog at times, from time to time, and they farm, they have vegetables and so forth. And Nicasio told us that about once a month, a deer will wander onto their property, and he kills the deer and dresses it, and so they have venison for a while. But this structure that we're in, there's the house would be back kind of where we are, but he built this just since I've seen that house before, but he built this, him and some of his relatives constructed this, did the construction themselves. That's a thatched roof, and he kind of showed us how they do some of that. And we sat and visited with him one afternoon while we were trying to find a sister, but never did. But it was a great time to have a visit. This is at a different congregation. This is at San Pedro, Colombia, and this is one of the preachers down there. It's been a long time sponsored by a Mayfair congregation here in town. This is Venus and his wife. Whoops, did I goof up? Yeah. This is Venus and his wife Fernanda, and he's the preacher, as I said, there. And we were visiting one night after church. We would usually have 20, 25. Interesting thing about it, of course, we only spoke one time at Crickahootie. The other places we spoke either 3 or 4 times, and I never had noticed this before. Each time, we started out with a nice number, and it grew and grew and grew. We had more people coming, which was exciting to us. But Fernanda would each night, with these 25 or maybe eventually 30 people, would serve some kind of refreshment, sandwiches, or some kind of drink, or a cookie, or a cake, or something. And so they're just being hospitable as they can to the church members and the visitors that would have been present. Also, at that San Pedro church, you can't really read it. I wish I could get a better picture. And if you could see the letters, you probably couldn't read them because they're in Mopan. The Mayan Indian people have 3 distinct dialects in that area. We work with churches that speak in 2 of those, Mopan, or a language called Quechua. They all speak English, but when they're talking to each other, and a lot of their services, a lot of parts of their service are in their local dialect. Well, each night we would sing anywhere from 1 to 3 songs of their language. Now, man, Jacob took to that. He could sing those songs and knew those words and everything. Ted and I didn't do so well. We've kind of come along and sing with it, but it was interesting. That's something that hadn't happened to us necessarily before. In that area, the reason we stopped here is because one of the preachers, his daughter works there. They raise small-time farmers, just family farmers, will raise as part of their crops the cocoa bean or cocoa beans to make chocolate with. But they do something interesting. Their farming right there is organic. They don't sell to Hershey and Nestle and those companies because they have their big mass process. They sell to small individual chocolatiers that use only organic products and make organic finished product. But this is a part of their places where the farmers bring these beans in. They're spread out to dry out. They cure them. They grade them. They put them in bags, and they're shipped all over the world. It's just a fascinating little thing to see, along with our other traveling that we're doing. This is again Venus and his wife there to the left, the second one. And 2 of their kids. There were 2 more kids that we got to interact with, but they didn't get into this picture. But we had lunch with them on the second Sunday we were there. Wonderful meal. We had several meals in the homes of people, which we really enjoyed. And I know Gloria always said don't eat the local meals, but we just ate them and had a big time and had a lot of, this day particularly, we were toward the end of our trip, and we were just laughing and having a good time and remembering things from previous trips. This is another one of the preachers. This is Kenyon on the right there. He's the young preacher. His wife Holly and 4 kids, including the baby who was born. The last time that Francie and I were there, she was getting quite large with her baby coming. And so 3 boys and this little girl, and they're just a wonderful family. And this is inside what we call the apartment There's one of the rooms that has a regular hotel room and bathroom, but then it has a little kitchen, dining room area, and kind of almost like a living room. Great place to have people come over if they're local to visit with us, and they came over a couple of times, and just delightful folks, wonderful work. He's working there with these 4 congregations. The one in Punta Gorda, or PG, is the largest, and he's a very effective young evangelist there with that work. Dr. Ted always has a ministry going on, kind of on his own. I don't know how long he's been doing it, of bringing along eyeglasses, reading glasses, not prescription glasses, but reading glasses. This year he brought 40 pairs, and gave them all away. Not only to older folks, you think they might be the ones that every time he mentions something, oh man, they'll try on the different strengths and sizes, and even gave some to children that needed some help with their reading glasses. And so this is him helping a lady there with some reading glasses. This is, this is at the San Pedro congregation, probably the first night. A few people, that filled in some more as it went on. With me up preaching, you see Dr. Ted there on the left. And Jacob, you must have been at the back taking the picture at this point. But that's kind of gives you an idea of the simplicity, but they're functional. The church buildings are very simple and very practical. It's very hot, hotter than here, and much more humid. It seems like the daytime average, the heat index was around 106 each day. I preached 11 times in that heat and was pretty exhausted by the time I got there. I loved it, but it would be pretty demanding, and for all of us, but especially I feel very tired at the end of each day. This is back in the Punta Gorda building. They have just a little slightly nicer building. This is one of the earlier nights, but they've done a little more decorating, and you'll see. Also, PG, Punta Gorda, the one that's on the ocean, is made up primarily of people of African descent. There's some that are called Africans. There's some from Jamaica. There's the Creole, which is a mixture of African and other races. Not so many white people, and a few of the Mayans. In contrast, out in the villages, the 3 other churches in the villages, they're almost 100% Mayan Indians. So you'll notice here, if you look around, you'll see several people that would look very much like American blacks, and they're from that heritage, that ancestry. Preaching there, wearing the same clothes I'm wearing now. This was my favorite outfit to wear down there, what I've got on right now. There's Dr. Ted, I think, helping a little boy that didn't see very well, trying to get him some glasses. That's the vehicle that we rented and used the whole time. That's the 3rd time I've used that same vehicle. Gloria, you drove it. I drove it when Francie and I went. We drove it again this year. I don't know how long that thing can hold up on those roads, but it keeps on going. So, and this lady is Samantha at her house. We studied with Samantha and her husband the first time we were there, had a couple studies, and she was baptized about 2 weeks after we left. And so we're visiting with her, and these are some of the kids. Some of those are her children, some of their cousins that live nearby. And now her husband, Evan, for a long time, he was one of those very resistant, didn't want to come very much. He is in the last year started coming to church much more. I had a study with him and her sister named Carolyn. The interesting thing, I don't know what this is, you can present the gospel to them, you can talk about the urgency of it and the importance of it, and they always seem to say, I got to think about it, I got to think about it, and then eventually, hopefully they will. So both of those 2 people, Evan, her husband, and Carolyn, promised that they would be baptized. We met with another mother and daughter who did the same thing. They understand the gospel, but they just are reluctant for some reason. They promised us that soon they would be baptized, and we certainly pray that they will be. While we were there were 2 baptisms. This is out in the bay, the ocean. The water's pretty calm that day. We were happy that those happened, but they weren't directly related to our work. They just happened to occur while we were there, but we were thrilled. That's Kenyon, the preacher, baptizing the young man that had started attending there a few months ago named Mr. Galloway, a native of Punta Gorda. This picture is one of the first people when we went, the first time I went was Matilda. She looks like a kid. She's about 35 years old. And this is their home. We have been out there as a team and visited with them several times. Francie and I visited there a couple of times when we went. And so this is her 4 children. Her husband, they invited us for lunch. After we preached in Crickahootie, we stopped back by, it's kind of on the way back to PG, and they had a homemade meal for us, really delightful. It's always an interesting thing when this didn't happen this time, but when you're there in the afternoon and the chickens running around, and say, "Oh, Brother Keith, there's your supper," you know, right there. So, and that's kind of the way it happens. But this is her husband Lewis was there, but he had to leave before we got around to taking this picture. To leave, he goes and gets on a bus and goes and works 5 days a week and comes home on the weekends. But this is Matilda, and their oldest child is 11. The little Michaela down there is 7. This is the one named after me. This is my namesake in Belize, Parker Keith. And the first time we met Matilda, she was about 7.5 months pregnant with him. And we were joking around, and they hadn't decided on the boy's name. And I said, "We ought to name him Keith. You got Caitlin and Michaela and all that going." Well, a month and a half later or so, got a call one night on the internet, and there was a baby crying in the background, and little Keith had just been born. So, seen him several times, and he is a charmer, to say the least. And then, since then, one more baby has been born. But this is, I like this picture because it kind of gives you a feel of what a lot of people live their homes. This, by the way, this is middle class. This is not poverty. These people eat well, they live off the land, they know how to do that, and they have safe structures to live in. Now there, they live real close to the jungle, and this is a thatched roof house and kitchen area. Jacob got to learn how to make tortillas on a wood-burning fire inside the house. The smoke goes up and goes through the thatch and all that. But of course, these kids, they run around on that rough rock and gravel, barefooted, just like it's got on shoes. It's kind of amazing, but glad we got this picture of Matilda and her family. This is at the church building in San Antonio. We got there, actually ended up preaching there 3 times, two weekday afternoons, and again on the last Sunday morning we were there. And probably know and have more internet connection with young people, both he and I, this is true, there, and hopefully always kind of want to extend that and find out more people to get involved in studying with us and talking online. So that's at San Antonio, which is in the Toledo district. This is inside that building, and this is their preacher, Gregorio, who is again a very short man. And what they're looking at specifically, Dr. Ted, in this congregation they speak Mopan, but somebody had asked if they could bring a Quechua Bible. We found one at another one of the congregations, and so they're looking at it and trying to figure out some things about that Bible, which is in one of their native dialects. Now, I don't know why I bent down. Maybe I was making an illustration. I think it's something about maybe the time Jesus wrote on the ground while the adulterous woman was brought to him or something. But anyway, but I wanted to show you this because up here, this is Gregorio the preacher. This is Christopher, who's a 92-year-old grandfather and great-grandfather and father of about half that church or more. And he's always at services. When you ask him to lead a prayer, you better settle in because it's going to be a long one, and it's very passionate, you can tell. He's 92 and going strong and always there at services and always very friendly. And but now he did something interesting this time. He's been sick, and he told Jacob and I said, "I won't ever see you brethren again this time, this side of heaven." And he said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, I won't be here next year, but I think he said that before, so I'm kind of expecting to see him next year too. So anyway, this is a young woman named Deborah and her son. I baptized her about 2.5 years ago on a previous trip there, and several others at a place. And this is outside that San Antonio building. Her indoor plumbing and everything, but they all have cell phones, which is very interesting. Now, this is Marcus, who is the father of the boy we talked about, Eduardo, that's visited here in this congregation. He died of cancer. He had a terrible growth on his face, and he came, and Dr. Cove and his family, Miss Vicky's here tonight too, hosted him for several months. Vanderbilt and other places trying to figure out what was going on. Finally went back, and I saw him about a month before he died, and had some great visiting time with him. This would have been in December, more than 2 Decembers ago. And but this is his dad, Marcus, who we visited in their home. This is actually at his sister's house, and this is Ted and Jacob visiting. This is the woman's son. The reason she had invited us there was the son is having a problem with epileptic seizures, and she wanted to ask Dr. Cobb, and it looks like Dr. Jackson too, to give some information there, but I don't know what that's about. But anyway, but think about Jackson and Marcus and Maria. Let's see. Did we freeze up? Fred? See, can you get that to move up there,
I
Carl?
can change it now.
What?
I said I can change it.
Okay, go ahead and change it, please, to the next one. All right, this is Raymond. I want you to look at that face, look at those eyes. And if that alone won't melt you, and Dr. Ted's already told you part of the story, and Jacob did too. Of course, they lost this brother, Eduardo, to cancer, a year and a half ago or more. And this little girl has been deaf, and Dr. Cobb and others have tried to take down very expensive hearing aids that would just try to create some noise, but it was just noise. It wasn't really anything discernible. And when he took this new gadget, or it's new to us at least, what he called bone, instead of putting the ears, the auditory nerves on the inside are good. The ears are bad. And so they put this where it sends the vibrations through, like your cheekbones or this bone's closest to the ear. And when he put that on her and started playing music, when she heard music for the first time, she squealed with delight. And then she heard her mother's voice for the first time, and her father's voice, and then we talked to her. Now, the interesting thing, all the sound is in here. There's no direction to it. So she'd have to, when somebody was talking, she'd have to look around, and then, but she could read her mother's lips and kind of understand what she wanted to say. Oh, she also knows the language. Early on, 2 years ago or more, she and I developed this little thing where this is the only sign language I know. He said, from the heart, I love you. And so when we first saw each other, we both did that to each other and grinned and everything. Sweet, sweet, darling little girl. But she heard her mother's voice and heard her father's voice, and they're going to try to, and Jacob did. Jacob was our techie. He helped a whole lot figure out how to get that where it would work with a regular cell phone and system. We're getting that back to her. She was disappointed when we took it away, because she was hearing music and people's voices for the first time. She tried to talk. She was the first time, like Dr. Ted said, but it was la 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 la. It was just excited, and she doesn't know words. She's like a baby. I mean, her mind is good, but she doesn't know language. And so, I would be praying for her and for this. This experience of watching all that happen was the first time I ever felt like it was close as I ever been to a miracle. It was just very emotional for all of us, and very meaningful, and pretty important part of the trip. Okay, move it again, please, Carson.
There we go.
These guys, you try to take good people, and what happens? I caught them coming out of this place. No, actually, we were walking down the street, and I said, hey, you guys stop there, I want to get a picture of them. And it was afterwards that they figured out why I wanted to get a picture of them in front of Brad's gambling company. Yeah, these people are innocent and kind of naive in some ways, but listen, they have all the problems that our society has and more. And I'm going to quickly tell the story. Jacob's had his own struggles with drugs and so forth, and come through that, but so thankful to God. But one day when we were going to have a study, Ted and I were invited to have a Bible study with his mother and daughter, he decided to strike out on his own from our hotel one of the days in the daytime and walk towards town. We were about 6 or 8 blocks from the ocean, kind of walk over this way and walk along the ocean, and we'll come back through the heart of town where the market is. And only 3 times in that little walk was he approached by guys trying to sell him pot or marijuana. And of course he said no, but he picked up on in ways that we wouldn't, just a whole lot, super infused with a lot of drug culture down there in PG and other places. So, and he got to talk to some people about that. Got to talk to some kids in the church that have struggled with that too, and that was an important part of the ministry. Next one, Carson. All right, the chief cook and bottle washer is eating tuna out of a bag, just like a lot of you do. And we're hoping next year to have some more people go with us, particularly some female types. But in fact, I'll tell you two guys, Rachel might go and might assume that she's going to step into that role. I'm going to tell her we've got that all covered. The chief cook and bottle washer's got everything. Is that okay? Not. It was a joke, but we did a little bit of cooking. And the blessing of all blessings was there's a mother and daughter, members of the church there in PG, that just a few weeks before we went, I saw she had posted a kind of ad on Facebook that she does catering of meals. So we had a lot of the meals, she would fix them and have somebody bring them to our hotel. And so a lot of nights and and so forth. We eat a home-cooked meal, and I'll show you a little bit of that. But there's Jacob scrambling some eggs for us in our apartment. Next one, Carson. Oh, when we opened up the meals each night, we never knew what we was going to get. You see that fish? That was one of the, now the first one, the one on the right, was our roast beef, very good. The vegetable was always these large, super large to me, slices of, avocado, and the beans, of course. But one night we had this fish, and we sat there eating. Boy, once you got into it, it was really good, wonderful flavor, well cooked and everything. But Jacob finally said, "I'm sorry, I just can't eat something that's looking back at me." And so I said, "Well, I can solve that." I didn't know what I was doing at all. I just reached over and snapped the head off and threw it in the trash can, snapped the tail off, and then he hey, welcome, you're here. You're in some of the pictures. I'll introduce them in a moment. But so we went ahead and ate the fish, but that was a real blessing having Sister Gomez and some of the others fix our meals. Next one, Carson. This, I don't know, it's kind of interesting on the meal. The first Saturday night we were there, we ate at a place that I'd eaten at before, and we went back the second Saturday night, and Jacob fell in love with this place because it's up on the second floor. It's kind of a compound of a house and maybe a hotel room or two, and second floor, and right outside the windows here are the jungle, and right across the street's the ocean, and they play some soft music. The lady is the maitre d' and the hostess and the cook and everything, and she served us that last night. 3 of us agreed it was one of the best meals we've ever had, and had that shrimp up there and yams, candied yams, spinach, best spinach I've ever eaten, other cooked vegetables and everything, and sold all that 5-star meal for about $11 a plate. So it was just really quite reasonable. And maybe I think he wants to take me there sometime at that restaurant to eat. So next one, please. This is Sister Gomez, who her and her daughter fixed the meals for us. And I want to tell you about this for a moment. This was the last night we were there. We've been preaching ever since we got there, and preached that Monday, but we wanted to just go to church and just sit and maybe listen to Kenyon on Sunday night at PG, Punta Gorda. What we didn't know was, we didn't know this, they had a thing that they have once a month or so called Singspiration. They did a lot of singing and a lot of prayers and a few people sharing and so forth. And so we were there, and I hadn't met her before, but had this picture taken after the service there at PG. But during the service, I want to tell you what happened. This was our last night. We're going to fly out early the next morning. One of the brothers got up and started talking, and he's a kind of emotional guy, and he got very emotional about what it meant to them as Christians down there to have us come, preach for them, be with them, talk with them, just sing with them, whatever. And it was really pretty emotional. And that sort of set the stage. We didn't leave for a long time that night after church was over, and people just kept coming up, and the consistent thing I heard was, "Thank you, and please come again as soon as you can." You don't know how much this means to us as a church, where you come down here and share your lives with us like this. And so I've never had a send-off. I've gone on a lot of campaigns and a lot of mission trips, but I've never had quite a send-off like that. One more, Carson. This is a picture of one of my very favorite places on earth. This is about a mile and a half outside of San Antonio, the church building where the 92-year-old man and a lot of others were there. I baptized 4 people there. There's a river that actually runs real close to the church building, but that's not a good place to baptize. You go outside of town, and there's this little waterfall, and there's a little natural pool there, and out in the middle of it's about waist deep, close to waist deep on me, which is perfect for baptizing. The water's crystal clear, and you can always see hundreds of little fish swimming around. I just always pray they're not piranhas, you know. But anyway, I baptized 4 people there, and so it's beautiful for that reason. It's a beautiful spot. And Mr. Jungle Lover back here, after we'd taken some pictures and so forth, he struck out on his own and did a kind of a circle around through the jungle part. Took about 20 minutes, working his way completely around, got across the river that pours out the other way, got across the waterfall somehow, and came back to us. And so this is one of my favorite pictures and one of the favorite spots, and the 3 of us. I would like to say this in closing, that not everybody gets to go on a mission trip. Not many people have that experience. And if you ever do have a chance to go, I would urge you to go. But everybody can participate in the sending and the praying for while some of us do get to go. Others might get to go. And Jacob was helped by so many. Several people are here tonight that helped Jacob go. And this church, part of my compensation here is they provide for my trip. And Dr. Cove, he does his own, which is very gracious. But who else may go in the years ahead? We're going to sing a song, and we're going to close the service with called "Send the Light." And a lot of you familiar with that song. So if you can't personally take the light, you can take it here in town, of course, wherever you are. But if you can't do that, let's think about always trying to send the light of the gospel to the world. So Mark, if you will come and lead us in that song, and then Jim Harrington, who's been on the Belize several times, will lead us in a closing prayer and give thanks for the meal we're going to enjoy in just a few minutes. So lead that song and then the prayer, and then we'll just all move over to the fellowship area for continuance.
It's number 572. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless way. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, 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 send the light. The blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore, send the light. Gospel light, let it shine forevermore. We have heard the Macedonian call today. Send the light, send the light, and the golden offering at the cross we lay. Send the light, send the light, send the light. Gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore, send the light.